I am Tujilane Chizumila, a Malawian. I grew up in Tanzania as a refugee child from the age of 12. I came here with my parents. My father had been appointed a diplomat to the UN in 1964 when Malawi became independent. But by 1965, there was what is called the famous cabinet crisis of Malawi, and my father had to run away as a refugee with his family to Tanzania. So I grew up here from the age of 12, went to primary 7 at Changombe Primary School, then moved to Moshi. That time my father was teaching at Odi Moshi Secondary School in Kilimanjaro, where I did Form 1 to Form 4 at Assumpta College, now known as Weruweru Secondary School. Then I moved to Yangwani High School for my Form 5 and 6, and finally I joined the University of Dar es Salaam Law School. After graduating, I went and joined the Tanzania Legal Corporation, where I worked as a corporation counsel for 10 years. And in between, I went to Germany for my master's program. When I returned, that's the time I now went back home to Malawi as a returnee. In Malawi, I worked with the government of Malawi as a state attorney, and then I worked for Save the Children US Federation and UNHCR, where I worked with the Mozambican refugees. That was a very great opportunity for me to give back to UNHCR what it gave to us, me and my family, when we were refugees here in Tanzania. After UNHCR, I started my own legal firm for 7 years, and I became the first female lawyer in Malawi to establish her own legal firm. Then I was appointed ambassador of Malawi to Zimbabwe and SADC. SADC is Southern Africa Development Corporation. After that, I was appointed judge of the High Court of Malawi. Then I became the public ombudsman of Malawi, becoming the first female ombudsman. And I'm proud to say, since then, all the other ombudsmen after me are all women. Once I retired as ombudsman, it's when I applied to become a judge of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. And I was elected for the first time, for the first term of 6 years. I've just been re-elected last year for the second term of 6 years, and that's where I'm now working. So in a nutshell, that has been my working life. I have already mentioned briefly that we came here because of the 1964 cabinet crisis. Now, what needs to be known is that in those days, all the people in the cabinet were all friends, colleagues, and also those who were in the public service, they all knew each other. So obviously, when that cabinet crisis happened, it affected my father. He received a recall to go back home, but fortunately, one friend of his called him and told him not to go back because the plan had been to kill him and to send his family to the village. So we ran away. And I remember him coming home that day, informing us, calling a meeting. I was the oldest of the 3 siblings. There was my aunt. My mother was just crying, informing us that we were leaving the US to become refugees. I had no clue what it meant to be a refugee at that age. So we flew to the UK, where we lived for about 2-3 months in a hotel. My father got a job with one university in Germany. But his colleagues who had run away to Zambia kept on pushing him to go and join them so that they overthrow the president, then Dr. Kamuzu Banda. That was their aim. So we left for Zambia, but security was very, very poor. So we had to come to Tanzania. Security was poor in Zambia in the sense that Malawi government could send its people to abduct the Malawians who had run away to Zambia and take them back home for imprisonment or even for killing them. So it was very scary. And that's when we ended up here in Tanzania. We were at the New African Hotel until this day my father called for another meeting to say we were now going to stay at a government-given accommodation in the form of flats. Those flats were the first ones built at Changombe. I had an opportunity to visit them last year. They have grown as old as I have, but they hold such a special place in my heart. The first one that I recall from that age was again another meeting by my dad telling us that the government had screened all the refugees that were staying at those Changombe flats. I'm sure they must have done it with all the other refugees living in other areas. And that screening was to find out which refugees had skills and could be given jobs. That's how my father ended up being a teacher at Odimoshi Secondary School and later as a lecturer at the University of Dar es Salaam. All the other refugees that had no skills were now sent to the camp in Tabora. So I do recall that very well, that happened. Yes, there are several lessons that can be learned from the way the Tanzanian government has handled refugees in this country from my days. The first one is the freedom you get. You feel so free to live in this country. And as kids, honestly, we never felt we were refugees, apart from the few minor issues I mentioned. The language was a big crisis for us as kids at school. I remember how we could not sing the national anthem and the teachers couldn't understand why we could not speak Swahili because we were Africans. The same at the boarding schools we went to. But yes, the Tanzanian government started with that approach of skills training for refugees, and that could be a very good lesson to be taught across the world. It really helped. It built up a lot of love. I would call it love, because you are a refugee, you've got nothing, and hey, you are being given an opportunity to work. Others were given agricultural land. Those who went to the refugee camps, I remember we had quite a lot of Malawians with Makonde blood. Now, the Makondes are from Mozambique, and they are very good at cultural making wooden carvings. So they were able to be doing that whilst in the camps, selling. They were able to sell and make some money out of that. So that is a good lesson to be learned from. Education. The government provided education to accessibility for us who were able to pay fees, like my father. He paid fees for all the 3 kids he had. I was at Assumpta, now Werwero, as I said, then Jangwani Secondary School. My young brother after me was at Tanzania. The last born was at Tambaza Secondary School. So he was paying school fees throughout, even my first year at university, until we got a scholarship to assist me through my university degree. But that access was there given by government. All you needed was to show proof that you are a refugee. And the proof also, the access to immigration. I remember at that age going to immigration office to ensure that I had my permit, education permit. So that is not common with other countries. And this is a lesson I would urge other countries and other governments dealing with refugees to follow. Again, I do remember in the refugee camps, they were given access, especially to primary schools for the kids that were of primary school level. There was access to medical facilities. I've already talked about access to land. And I think generally that is what I would say Tanzania has continued to do, and bettering itself and making itself really known on the African continent as one of the countries hosting a lot of refugees, millions of refugees since the 60s. I will start by sharing an interesting experience after growing up here. And growing up here meant going through the Ujamaism, the Ujamaa policies that were established and introduced by the first president of Tanzania, President Nyerere, and also going through what I would call self-independence, gender independence for the female, for the girl child. That was my first time to learn that I was equal to the boys in my classroom, be it from primary all the way to college. I was equal at work. I received equal payment as a female, which was quite rare in those days. So having grown up with that kind of mindset, I then went back home to Malawi. When I joined Save the Children, Federation US, we were dealing with communities that were hosting refugees. So we went there for a meeting. I was representing my boss, who was a man. He was an American. And I was supposed to give my speech on behalf of Save the Children. When I stood up, it was the women who pulled me down. No, madam, sit down, sit down. You're not supposed to stand up in front of our chief. I'm like, but I'm not here as a woman. I'm here as a representative of my organization. No. Women don't stand up to talk to the chief. I was like, what? That was a big shock to me. And that is something that I learned from Tanzania. And so growing up as a judge, I've learned that human rights are so crucial. I have learned that all human beings are equal and they need to be treated equally. And I've learned that the laws do not reach all the people. There are others who know the laws, but they turn a blind eye to the laws. So having reached the stage that I've reached, I'm out there always doing my best, trying my best, networking, and also utilizing my experiences on the job that I'm currently holding. To start with, I will say I noticed even now at home in Malawi, I went back as a returnee, and that's another story for another day. The experiences of being a returnee, having gone back from Tanzania as a refugee. But I have noticed that the minute I mentioned that I was a refugee, people sort of recoil. Even back home, a lot of people, even at seminars, conferences, they don't want me to mention the fact that I was a refugee. But hey, I was a refugee for almost 1/3 of my life, my lifetime. So, and in the process, I ended up getting married to a Tanzanian. I have children who are Tanzanians. So it's part and parcel. That life of being a refugee is part and parcel of my life up to now. So it is not easy. A lot of people believe that once you are a refugee, you are a beggar for aid. All you want is aid. You want to be given free food by UNHCR and other international organizations. So I am hoping that through my sharing of my story as a refugee child and to where I have reached, what I have gone through, the positions that I've had, people will realize that refugees also do have skills. Refugees, if given an opportunity, can grow up into something big and help the society where they are refugees and also their own home countries when they return, and the whole international world for that matter. So I have written a book, volume 1. It's called From a Refugee Girl to a Judge, My Journey, and it's talking about my life as a refugee child and how it affected my children and has also affected my grandchildren. 3 generations, actually 4, because we have to start with my father's generation. Volume 2 is going to talk now about the effects of being a refugee when you return back home to your country as a returnee. So I am busy advocating for support to refugees, to understand that they are also human beings, and for governments, UN agencies, international bodies, and the local communities. What I find interesting is that the local communities around the areas where the refugees live, they live harmoniously. They live harmoniously. So that is what I'm advocating for from my experiences. Yeah. I think I have already mentioned about how governments, international organizations, policy organizations, and local communities can work together. There is need to be sitting down with the refugees and finding out what their concerns are and sitting down with them so that they are part and parcel of the solutions. Otherwise, if they are left alone, then it brings that division and stigmatization between the local communities and the refugees, and also not only local communities, even some government officials do not understand why these refugees keep on coming and coming back to Tanzania. But I would like here to point out that it will be good for this information to reach the world, that Tanzania is one of the safest places for refugees. And that's why it is always getting so many refugees. Not that it's a good thing to be getting more refugees each and every time, but it is my hope that in the near future, the issue of refugees will be sorted out, especially in the region and in the whole world. Just to say and add on that there is need for a lot of publicizing issues of refugees. So governments, international organizations, and academicians, the media should really be working together on how to publicize information, basic information on the refugees, conducting researches and sharing it to the world. The Tanzanian way of handling refugees is a story that should be really shared to the whole world, and utilizing former refugees like me to even be addressing some of those conferences, attending the meetings, and also sharing our stories like I have done. Thank you.